Hey everyone, it's Chad Ostrowski from the Teach Better team, and I have the one, the only, my very own Wonder Woman tonight, Dr. Bertrand, okay? Pulling together an amazing mastery chat. Shamaine, how are you feeling right now?
Listen, I'm gonna be honest. The sister is tired. My little fingers hurt. My little brain hurts. I mean, my brain is kind of big because I'm smart like that. But I mean, I'm just hurting. This probably wasn't a good thing for me to come on after the chat.
It makes it better. It's better. It's better. I swear. We did have a kind of a deep issue tonight, a meaningful issue, a topical issue about inequity in education, which, you know, like you are one of my go-to people when I have this conversation. You get to talk to schools and districts across the country and do this work on the ground in the trenches, which is amazing. So this is such a topical thing based on everything we've seen in the last few months. But what are some things that resonated with you in this chat on this topic from tonight? What are some of your standout sort of overall feelings or takeaways from the chat?
I'm going to start with, I used to be a fourth grade teacher, so I'm going to start with the Oreo effect, right? You give the good, then you give like something to work on.
I got you.
With it.
I got you.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to sandwich this. First of all, I was really happy about the number of participants and the number of participants who they knew what they were getting. They knew the conversation that we were going to have. They knew that it was going to be deep. And even still, they participated in the chat. So I do want to shout out everybody who participated in Mastery Chat tonight. It was so lit. Like, for those who don't know what that means, it was just a great joy to be part of. So I should have come on this. I should not have come on this.
You just Urban Dictionary'd yourself.
Look at what I just gave the people some lingo. Now don't go to class and start talking about, oh my gosh, it's so lit here. Don't do that. But anyway, so that part was great. I think that we started to have a lot of like the questions up front were self-reflective pieces where I'm really pushing people to do that self-work. And I think towards the end, when I started saying, okay, now we're shifting. I did a little shift there. We're shifting from the self to now, what are you actually going to do? Because good Lord, y'all done bought out all the Robin DiAngelo White Fragility books and the Cultivating Genius books. I can't even get Cultivating Genius for my own research by Golden Muhammad because folk out here reading it. And so now it's kind of like, okay, you got all of this. What are you going to do with it? How are you now going to have those conversations? And I'm still in the middle. I'm still with the cream. This is the problem that I was seeing in the chat is that some people were actually like, dang, I'm scared. Or I got this a lot too. I'm talking to my Black colleagues or my, colleagues of color. And while that's a great idea, you have to also understand that they're healing right now. So some of this work is going to have to go on you. You're not going to be able to utilize those friends and colleagues unless you had a conversation prior to. But I think overall here, I'm closing it out. Overall, it was a great chat, and I love the resources. Oh my goodness, so many resources were shared on that chat tonight, and I'm hoping that people go to those websites, those books that you're reading, and put it into play come August or September, whenever your school year starts.
Wow, there was so much greatness in that. I don't even know where to kind of start. Stop it. But I think you make a great point, though, in that if we know a demographic or our friends or our close people are suffering and going through this, now is not the time to lean on them.
If you lean on me, you're gonna fall.
Like I can't lean on you and go, hey Shamaine, can you help fix me right now? Is now a good time? Right? Like, is now a good time to fix my white privilege? Is now a good time to right? Like that's like, it's almost like part of the problem, right? Like we're looking to these external sources as opposed to looking, and I like that about your questions, right? You started internal first. We have to do that self-work. We have to do that self-reflection. And based on those Amazon sales you were just talking about, I'm thinking people are hopefully getting the tools they need. But I absolutely agree with you in your second point of what are you going to do with it? I think we have sat on the sidelines for way too long. I was just talking to Jeff Gargas about this earlier today. We were just reflecting on just everything we've been learning and the conversations we've been having. And the fact is, like, this isn't an African American problem. This is a problem in the United States of America. And this problem doesn't get solved by one group or subset of our population working, or one group or subset of our population protesting. It gets solved by every single one of us actively calling out racism when we see it, actively being part of the discussion, actively marching and walking with you as an ally, as a subset, as a part of the population that's just been completely demeaned and just taken advantage of for the last 300 years of our country's history. You're getting me all fired up now. Yeah, exactly. So to sit here and I think I said this even in the chat, like, I can't know what it's like in your shoes, right? I can't know that. I can't know what it's like to be on your journey, but that doesn't mean I can't walk with you. That doesn't mean I can't fight next to you. That doesn't mean I can't stand up and fight and be active in the fight, because when any subset of our population, whether you're talking about indigenous peoples, Black, African American, like whatever it is, when one's population starts to thrive, when one part of the population starts to thrive, we all benefit, right? And that's something that's so overlooked, right? Helping one part of the pie doesn't mean the other part of the pie gets less, right? It means we all improve. Because, and I just think that's, sorry, I got super excited, but you get me fired up, Dr. Bertrand. You get me fired up. I'm just telling you. But I love that. It's about acting. It's about taking those steps. So one thing that I brought up, and we had talked briefly in the chat for like the half second you had to respond to me because there was a lot going on. I had posed a question, and I told you we could talk about it afterwards, so I'm going to pose it now. One of the biggest differences between this time and space, I think, and you can tell me if you agree or not, is that we have an immaculate record of where every person is standing. We basically have a perfect record from social media and everything else where almost every individual is standing in this fight. Now, if you look back through history, right? If you look back through slavery, or you look back through the Holocaust, or other horrible things in our history, like, we don't have a record of who was for what, other than like longer lists. But like right now, you're putting yourself in history in which side you were on, right? So something I reflect on is like, do I want to be on the sideline in that discussion when someone looks back at my post 20 years from now? Or do I want to be a fighter? Do I want to be on the right side of history? Because you can argue politics all you want, but as far as I'm concerned, we all know what the right side is. Like, there's no question in my mind what the humane answer is.
No,
right?
You're talking. I think
so. That's kind of, go ahead.
I think right now, as you pose this question, this has been a issue. Racism in our country has been an issue for 400 plus years. I mean, it is. I think now what is happening now is people are sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? And so we see that happening after, the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Rayshard Brooks. So now you see people actually saying enough is enough. And so I think as educators, and this is something that was happening in the chat, a lot of people feel scared because they don't feel like they have the right knowledge or they have the experiences to talk about. We don't have, as a Black woman, I don't have the privilege to be silent right now. I just don't. I can't choose a side. Right. I could choose a side, but that would not be appropriate. But I think that teachers are going to have to use their platforms. You're going to have to use your voice. You cannot stay silent, because silence is a form of complicity. Like, you agree what's happening if you are not speaking up. And I'm seeing now people are going to have to choose a side. You can be quiet, but then what message does that send to your students? And one of the people in the chat said that they teach only white students. And so my response was, there still has to be these conversations, because they're not going to, I mean, you have to address white supremacy, racism. You can't say in your whole life you're never going to be with a Black person, or you're never going to be beside an indigenous person or Latinx person. So you have to prepare them for the issues that's going on, but also their experiences in general. And so I think that everybody that's an educator right now is going to have to go in their classrooms and not create a space of just dialogue. I've talked out. I think now it has to be action. Like teachers are going to have to say, this is what we're doing in my classroom. If I have all these white heroes on my wall, I'm gonna have to change that up. Y'all, we gonna spruce up this place with a little Langston Hughes, a little President Obama, a little this, a little that. We're going to start changing our curriculum. We're going to make sure that our curriculum is not perpetuating white supremacy. We are going to look at our discipline. That was one of the questions that came up today. You have so many people on the chat that were saying our discipline we have discipline problems. We have discipline problems. You know it exists. Why is it still existing? So we're going to really have to address some things, and we cannot sit on the sidelines and be spectators. I don't have the privilege of doing it, and I don't think an educator has that privilege either.
Right. Wow.
We shouldn't have talked about it. We got me fired up too, Chad.
Oh, I'm loving this. We can just keep going. Like, this is amazing. Hans just said yes. You are on fire right now. Carly Spina said it's time for action. Absolutely. Maggie's talking about how this is causing her to reflect tonight.
That's good.
Susan Alice is saying that she learned a lot. She needs to go back and reread the conversation. So there's so much reflection, and these are the types of things that are happening. But I think the big take home you're trying to articulate right now very, very well is the fact that you can read all the books you want. You can know all the things you want, but talk is cheap. Right?
Can I get that for our article?
Yeah, you can steal it. It's yours. You can have it. It was inspired by you anyway, so like it's sort of I mean
I like that. I'm gonna go ahead and do something.
Yeah, you got it. That's my gift to you, I guess. So I mean, we're sitting here and we're going like, what can we do? And one of the things that I know, even me personally, as I sit here and reflect and in this conversation with you and throughout the chat tonight, is something I'm not doing, and this sounds super shallow a little bit of me, but is not scrolling by. And that sounds really, really weird, but I think it applies in person too, right? Like when we see racism, which we do, like whether we want to see it or we want to ignore it, doesn't matter. It exists in the world around every single person, right? As a white male, I have the privilege of not acknowledging it if I don't want to. I can ignore it. I can let it go by. I don't have to do something, however. So something I'm trying to be very cognizant of, and I'm trying to be vulnerable here. This isn't necessarily easy, but it's one of those things where it's like one thing I'm trying to be true to myself with is like, you can't keep scrolling anymore. Like you can't walk by when you see this happening and do nothing and say nothing. You can't not have a conversation if you see something happen to someone else. You can't not go and ask if they're okay, or say something to the person who offended them or anything like that. Like if as a country we all decided to act instead of watch, if as a country we decided to do instead of sit back, right? Like this is the difference, I think, and I think you're hitting on this very hard. As educators, we can educate ourselves all we want, but if we're not gonna act on our students, if we're going to, after something like George Floyd or Ahmaud, his last name is escaping me right now.
Arbery.
Thank you so much. Ahmaud Arbery happens. When we go into our classroom and pretend like everything's normal the next day, we are doing a disservice to our students because they see themselves in those people.
Absolutely.
Right? So like me going into my classroom and going, everything's normal, get out your books, turn to page 57 without even acknowledging it, right? And I was totally guilty of this. Like my students, and I taught high needs, inner city, large African-American student population. Like that's where I spent my entire career. There were times where I feel guilty now that I didn't speak up, where I knew something had happened in the neighborhood. I knew someone's cousin didn't make it through the weekend because of something or someone or something happened with the cops or this or that. And I didn't stop to have those conversations. And there's so many things I would have done differently. So like I have that guilt, but I guess the way I see it, like I go back to your first question, like what are you doing, right? To prepare yourself. And my ultimate answer, I'm going to rephrase it from the chat, is not enough, but I'm doing what I can and I'm going to be better tomorrow, right? Like it's, I can never do enough, to help, to support, to be an ally, in my opinion. But I can promise that I'm going to do everything I can and am able to do to be the best version and the best help and support I can to this cause and this fight. And I think that's the difference, right? Sitting on the sidelines or acting and doing something about it. And we all need to do that.
I think that's important. And I'm there's 2 points that I want to raise here. The first point is that we as educators, you brought up a good point. When students come back in the fall, not only have they had COVID-19, which impacted the Black community the hardest that they dealt with, that's trauma. Then now they have the trauma of what is happening right now with this anti-Blackness that occurs in the country. So again, as educators, we have to think through that. That first couple of weeks of school, we need to move past Harry Wong, throw that book out. We need to now go with, no offense to Harry Wong.
I got you.
But you know, the people always be trying to pull that book out. Don't do that.
Don't smile till Christmas.
Don't do that. I want teachers to really be reflective about their practices and how are you going to co-construct a place of safety? Because I hear teachers always talking about, oh, I want my classroom to be a safe space for whom? If you're creating a safe space and I don't see anything that looks like me within that classroom, that's not a safe space for me. And so I want teachers to think about how they're creating that space, but also how they're putting healing in the midst of that, because there's a lot of students who are going to come with hurt and pain and trauma. I'm not asking you to be Captain Save a student. I'm not asking you to be a savior. What I'm asking you to do is provide just an opportunity for students to be centered in your classroom and students to bring in their assets. Gholdy Muhammad talks about cultivating genius, looking at students as they're already bringing something into those spaces. The second part to that is, which I totally just forgot, but I think my second part was going to be something around, oh, dang, Chad, I forgot. Dang it.
You're okay.
It'll come back to me in just a second.
I love your thought about letting students see themselves in your content in your class, right? They've done experiments with this where they take young students and they say, draw a scientist, right? And everyone draws some old white guy with a beaker and messed up right hair, right? And then I don't know if you've probably seen these studies and other ones like them, but then you show them books about real scientists, African-American scientists, women scientists, young, old, and everything else. And you ask them the same question after you've had these conversations. Well, in the research, they all draw different looking scientists when you go back and ask them to do, and this is with young elementary students, right? So it's one of those things where like students need to see themselves in the history, in the literature, and in the pieces. My wife is an editor for an educational textbook company, and she just had a not an awkward meeting, but a meeting with one of her authors, and she said, you have way too much of one type of author in this literature resource, right? Like I'm looking through this and there is zero diversity, right? So I think we all need to do that with our classrooms. We need to reflect and go like, am I representing multiple voices, multiple cultures? Can the students see themselves in this process? And the thing is, the first thing that comes up on Google might not be the whole story either.
Or Pinterest.
Same thing. I had a principal, his name was Sandy Womack. He's a fantastic educator and leader in education. He does keynotes a lot, but he was the first principal I ever had. And one of the things he would do is he would give you like 10 to 15 names of African-American inventors, scientists, and people. And he would say, Google it. You're not going to find them. But this is what they did. This is what they invented. And it just made you rethink like, oh, I thought Thomas Edison was the only one that invented the light bulb. In fact, right, like there's all of these other supports where they were standing on the shoulders of this work that was being done by people that never got the credit they deserved. So if we shine a light on that as educators, I think that's huge.
I think so.
Also, I think another thing you hit on was just, and I want to kind of highlight this again because I think it's an important conversation. Being cognizant of the trauma that your students are coming into the year with, right? Not only the societal, political, racial, and trauma, but like the actual trauma from this crisis that they've just gone through. And as you said, I mean, like the Black communities have been hit harder than any other segment of the population. So, so what are some things you think teachers can do? I know letting students see them, but like, what would be like a good first 5 to 6 days of school? Like, what are some of those go-to things that you have seen be really successful that maybe teachers can at least start this process with?
I think that one of the things that I would do, I am a fan of restorative practice when it is done correctly, when the indigenous version is there and it's not completely centered on the person who is leading the mission.
Right.
And so I think that having those circles are important in class where we are sitting down, and it's not a force that everybody has to share, but we're bringing in conversation. So just simply saying, not to re-traumatize students. So we are not going to say, well, how did your family experience COVID-19? But instead, today, this is what we are speaking about. We're going to speak about COVID-19. I would share as a teacher my personal experience, because one of the things that you want to do is you want to build trust. And the only way that somebody gets to trust you is when they think that you know them. I'm the type of person, I'm not going to tell my secrets until you tell yours, because if you slip up and tell my business, I'm going to tell your business. Like So like, I think that there has to be that transparency there, and maybe your students will never speak, but at least you're showing them. I think the next part to that would be saying, hey, listen, this has been a rough summer. And like you were telling the story of, there's been times when I was silent, and now I've decided that I have to speak. I know my point. Chad, can I tell my point?
Yeah, do it.
My point is going to tie into this, I promise. My point is that a lot of educators are on this ally thing, right? You know, I just want to be an ally. I'm going to speak up, and that's great. I need you to be a co-conspirator. And this is what Dr. Patina Love also talks about, is I need you to put your privilege on the line. So if you're not putting your white privilege on the line, then it's really not helping me. So if you're not using your voice and you're not asserting yourself into situations to protect me, that's not helping. And so that's another part to what teachers need to do when they get into those schools, is you need to really exert yourself into situations when it is a discipline situation. Let's not always be so quick to call the principal. Let's not always be so quick to make a judgment about the home life of our students. Let's listen to them and provide that space. And then another part to that is co-construction. Asking them, what does this classroom look like? We talked about this in the chat. Somebody was talking about how we expect students to conform to our rules in the classroom. Whose rules are those? I think Christopher Emdin does a good job with reality pedagogy. And in one of the chapters, I want to say it's chapter 2, he talks about church and how the Pentecostal pedagogy and how Black children are used to, he calls them neo-indigenous in the book, how they're used to this call and response at church, or you can get up, but then yet I come in school and you're trying to make me sit down. I think that we have to co-construct what those rules look like in the classroom. What are your expectations as a teacher, but what are their expectations? Let them have expectations for you. My college students will tell you, I've been doing this since I was 4th grade teacher. At the first day of school, they tell me what they expect from me, and I tell them what I expect from them. We have a co-constructed situation here. So when I'm out of line, they can check me. And when they out of line, believe me, baby, I ain't got no problem checking them. So I think that is something that there has to be, is this freedom. Nobody's trying to take your power or your big check from being a teacher, but you're going to have to sit here. You say I played that out. Teachers do need to make more money so the professors can make more money. But anyway, but I do think that those are things that are important as people start the new year. And again, as you are reading, pulling out things from those books, be reflective. I've read Robin DiAngelo. Think about your whiteness and how you perpetuate that in certain spaces. If you're reading Stamped, think about that rich history that is being discussed by Jason Reynolds and Kendi, and how can you apply that into your curriculum? Think about just everything that you're reading, how to be anti-racist. How are you possibly perpetuating racism? And so you have to really be transparent through this whole process and be open. It's going to be uncomfortable, but think about it. You have children's lives on the line. And right now I'm talking particularly about Black children. Their lives are on the line. So therefore you're going to have to feel a little uncomfortable as you continue to try to make a difference.
I think one of the best quotes I've ever heard is, be willing to put your privilege on the line.
Put it on the line.
That's like that. You just blew my mind right there.
Put it on the line.
I love it. be okay with being uncomfortable. And it's funny as well. I think so much of what you're saying also resonates with me because it's also student-centered pedagogy, right?
Yes.
So if we focus the design of our instruction based on our students and their needs, right? We are going to more organically be doing some of these things. Because if I look at my students, I go, I want them to see themselves in my curriculum. I want to see themselves in their experiences in my classroom. Even things like setting expectations collaboratively. One of the most powerful things I used to do with students is if they would get angry with me, the first question I would ask is not why did you do that? It says, have I done something to offend you, or did I do something wrong as the teacher, so that I can understand from my perspective what I've done. You know, is there anything that I haven't done that I should have done to make you feel more comfortable in this space, right? So it's like starting with that reflection. And first of all, they're not going to come back at you when you ask them that question because you've literally been vulnerable, right? So you're starting from that vulnerable place and you're turning the conversation. So instead of me just pointing the finger and going, you did X, Y, and Z, I can't believe you got up or talked or blah, 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 blah. That's me versus you as the student, right? As opposed to, I'm really sorry. I just want to better understand what just happened. Is there anything I did or could be doing differently to prevent that from occurring? And honestly, students will be honest with you most of the time. They'll be like, you know what, dude, like I was bored out of my mind. You know what? That's on me. I need to engage you more as a teacher. That's on me, right? And we need to be willing to be uncomfortable, to be in the wrong, to not be perfect, to not be, like you said, like this hero sort of esque perfect figure that's coming in to save the day all the time.
You like that Captain Save the Student.
Yeah. And so I think that's huge. And I think having those real discussions in that vulnerability is a great place to start. I absolutely love that.
I think that's important. And I think I don't want teachers to be scared to have these conversations and discussions. And let me tell you, you are not always going to get it right. And this is even for me, like going into the fall, I'm sitting here thinking about how am I, and I teach at a predominantly white institution. And I looked at my roster. I only have white girls in my class this upcoming semester. And so I still am going to have these conversations. And right now I am thinking about, how am I going to have these conversations? What work do I need to address with myself so that I can have these conversations? And I'm going to bet you anything on it. I'm going to make mistakes. But what happens is I find out that I made the mistake. I do my self-work on it. And I come back and say, you know what, y'all? I didn't approach this the right way. Let's try again. And I think that teachers are going to have that kind of attitude as they're moving into this new school year, especially if you're doing this thing virtually, because some districts might not go back to school. And that's going to make it even harder to be on Zoom having these conversations. But I think that you have to start somewhere. You just have to. So just go for it.
Yeah. I think what you're echoing right now, and I'm not trying to plug it, but like it's the better mindset. It's what we talk about on the Teach Better team all the time. Like, are you going to be better tomorrow than you are today?
What can you do?
What can you do to do a little bit more, right? To put my privilege on the line. What can you do to do a little bit more to stand up and be anti-racist instead of just sitting here not being it, right?
Exactly.
Right? Because these problems don't get solved from one demographic standing up. We all have to stand up. We all have to fight. We all have to speak out. We all have to act. And that's the only way we move forward. And I'm hopeful that the tragedies of the last few months have been enough of a momentum builder to finally make some of these things that are so overdue, 400 years, you said, start to finally happen, right? And it's not like it's going to be over next month, but I think that, but to me, this conversation does feel a little different. It does feel like more cogs are turning, more things are happening, more people are standing up. Well, Dr. Bertrand, I don't want to keep you all night, but I do want to kind of start to wrap. I mean, I could talk to you forever and enjoy it, and it would be amazing. But I want to respect your time. So I'm going to kind of start wrapping this up. If there was one takeaway from tonight, one thing you would like every single participant, either in the chat or watching this after the chat, to take with them into tomorrow. So they're probably going to go to bed. They're probably going to wake up. What's one thought you'd want every single participant at least to be thinking about tomorrow or to have? I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but I think that's a good way to kind of close things out.
I think I'm just going to say that I need you to move into co-conspirator mode. Put your privilege on the line and do the work.
All right. You heard it from the source. Put your privilege on the line. Be a co-conspirator. I love it. This was an amazing chat.
It was.
Shamaine, it is always a pleasure. I can't wait to have more of these conversations with you.
I know. I can't wait.
I get so excited and worked up. I didn't even realize it had been 30 minutes. I got to be honest with you. But thank you, everybody, for taking the time to chat with us tonight. Shamaine, thank you so much. You were absolutely amazing, and you are always just inspiring and just fantastic to talk to. So I truly appreciate you. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Everyone have a fantastic evening. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.